doing here? We're Shiur together.
What do you mean, what's going
What's
on?
wrong?
What's wrong?
doesn't think I'm going to be on Zoom. What's the problem with the internet?
No, so far it's working.
We're good, right?
We're good to go.
Look at Levy's here. You say no one else will be on Zoom.
No, actually, Yehuda usually comes on
It doesn't
Zoom.
make a difference anyway. No on YouTube.
Doing here? We're Shiur together.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, Ben's on. Hello, good evening,
Hello,
Ben.
Ben.
We're working out, is it justified to put it on? Now that you're on,
Good evening. Yeah, my missus is going out tonight.
Oh, here he is. the man.
I don't know why he has to be put. Okay,
Yeah,
like
he's-
you don't mind?
He's the youngest.
Is it Kohen?
Youngest.
So what? That's not.
That's our boiler.
And he enjoys it. I think he enjoys the
Training on the spot.
Okay. Oh, Ben's son. Oh, good night for me as well. Yes, still you should stay up to hear the shiur.
Good night, do. I'll pop in every few minutes.
Right.
You could sweat back on it. Or see this back.
We've got another minute. Anybody want to say anything in a minute? Chavis Chaim writes that Saras was very, very, very painful, excruciating, right? Never knew that. It's quite. Saras wasn't just like a discoloration. It was excruciating. It was extremely painful. Interesting, that no?
When you're on.
Oh.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
I haven't managed to go through that with this bonus. It's very hard, very long. It's a very big safer. What happened was your brother was in my house for the sim, you didn't come. He said to me, hey, you've taken Levy's safer, so I borrowed it.
They're very protective. Okay.
Oh yeah, very protective. I was on I had it to my side because I haven't finished it. I put the phone which I'm busy with on the lower shelf from all the shop. I'm not busy. Okay, good evening, everyone. Oh, we're up to Daf Yoma Daf Gimel. Very exciting. The Sechta, Baruch Hashem. The Mishnah starts off 7 days before Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol has to separate and go into the Beis Hamikdash. Not only the Kohen Gadol, but there's somebody else that has to separate for 7 days. Who's the other one? The Paraduma, the one who does the Paraduma. The one who does the Paraduma also has to separate for 7 days. Where do we know that the Kohen Gadol and the Scan and the Paraduma, where do we know that they have to? Very good. And that pasuk was said by the Shiras Me'amiloim. Let's read the pasuk because we're going to dash it again and again today. Kasha also by Yom Hazeh, just like you've done today. Hashem has commanded that you should do to mechaper on you. Meaning, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Aaron and his sons, just like you did today, so too you've been commanded that you're going to have to do lasos lechaper. And the Gemara told us lasos is Paraduma, lechaper is Yom Kippur. So from there we know that you have to separate 7 days for Yom Kippur, 7 days for Paraduma. Now, the Gemara really lasos lechaper is pretty vague. We could understand that's referring to something else. What the Gemara tries to do is eliminate all other possibilities. And the Gemara does it bit by bit. The last one we were actually dealing with was Shmini Atzeres. The Gemara eliminated Sukkot and Pesach because Shmini Atzeres, because Pesach and Sukkot is separating 7 days for 7 days. While by Shminas Me'amiluim, you are separating 7 days for 1 day. So therefore you can't compare the Shminas Me'amiluim to Pesach and Sukkot. What the Gemara is asking now is, let us say that we should separate 7 days for 1 day, i.e. for which day? For Shmini Atzeres. The Gemara said that cannot be. Why can't it be that we should separate 7 days for Shmini Atzeres? Does anybody remember?
Why would we
It's from
separate
Sukkot.
the Shmini Atzeres, which is 1 day for the
Sukkot.
Oh, very good, Mamish. That since for Sukkot itself, which is more important and is the main Yom Tov, we don't separate. It won't make, because we said we don't do 7 for 7. It won't make any sense to not separate for Sukkot and yes, separate for Shmini Atzeres, which is just the Toffel, which is just the secondary to the Sukkot itself. So Gemara says, wait a second, who told you that Shmini Atzeres is tougher to Sukkot? Maybe Shmini Atzeres is its own Yom Tov. And in fact, it is its own Yom Tov. In how many different ways is Shmini Atzeres its own Yom Tov? 6. The way to remember it is without looking inside. Pazer Kashav. If you look in the piyutim of Shmini Atzeres, I try to say piyutim because I grew up in Old Torah quite a lot. In Old Torah, they say piyutim to this. Oh. So I still say piyutim nowadays, even though my shul doesn't, because I get such pleasure from saying it. Well, I'm careful not to say Shem, but I get such pleasure from saying it. I find not all the piyutim, most, a lot, whatever I can. And if you look at the piyutim of Shmini Atzeres, especially the ones in Ma'ariv, it literally goes through Pazer Kashav. And it's very interesting because the Tosfos Yeshonim over here quotes the piyut of the Ma'ariv of Shmini Atzeres. How often have you seen Rishonim quoting piyutim? It's not so often. We get it every so often. Here it is. Because we said yesterday that Rashi explains what Pazer Kashav is. And we said that not everything is agreed on. He tries to bring a lie from the piyut. Very, very briefly, Pazer Kashav, according to Rashi's pay is the pious. So Lotri, Zan is Man Shechionu. Reish is regal if that's we don't sit in the sukkah. Another explanation Rabbi Chananel says is a very interesting halacha that if a person loses a parent before Yom Tov, we cut down the shloshim because of Yom Tov. Rabbi Chananel holds that Shmini Atzeres is a second Yom Tov, meaning it's as if you've gone through 2 Yomim Tovim. You've gone through the whole of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, so therefore you've eliminated even more of the days of Arbelus. That's how Rabbi Chananel says it. Tosfos says very briefly, I said yes, I'm going to say a bit of Tosfos. Tosfos halacha is that Baal Ta'acha. Does anybody know how many Yom Tovim come to one shitta? How many? 3. Very good. You've got 3 Yom Tovim. If I promise to bring a comment today, I've got 3 Yom Tovim. So today I've got Shavuos, Sukkot. So Tosfos Shmini Atzeres is my 3rd. So it's according to Tosfos Regal b'fnei I've got 3 explanations.
6 months left.
According to Tosfos, Regal b'fnei means it's another Yom Tov. So therefore, if out of the 3, you've only gone through 2 just by going through Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres. 6 months less. Very good. That's what Tosfos says. It's a very long time way through it all. So he said, and Kashav is the Kuf, is Korban, the separate Korban. Shiur, Rashi says we don't know what Shiur. Tosfos it's a Perikut Beis. He brings from the Piyut, it's a separate Shiur altogether. And finally, Beis is Bracha, a special Bracha for the king. According to Tosfos, Bracha refers to a different thing. In Yalevi Yovoi, we say a different thing on Shmini Atzeres to that which we do on Pesach. On Pesach, for example, when you get to Yalevi Yovoi in the 7th day of Pesach, what do you say? But when you come to the Yalevi Yovoi or benching, let's say on Shmini Atzeres, what do you say? You don't say Chag HaSukkah, you say Shmini Atzeres, Chag HaSukkah. So therefore, it's a different bracha. Okay, so we've got different explanations. But whatever it may be, is Shmini Atzeres is a separate Yom Tov, maybe. It's a separate Yom Tov. If it's a separate Yom Tov, comes back to the question. You can't say that you can't separate 7 from 1 because it doesn't make any sense. What Levi and Shai said before, that you can't separate 7 from 1 if you're not separating from the sukkahs because Shmini Atzeres is tougher. It's not tougher. It's not secondary. How do I know it's not secondary? Because there's a whole load of differences. It's a whole separate Yom Tov. Answers the Gemara, you're wrong. It is secondary. It is secondary in one aspect. We said yesterday very briefly. I want to say it again. There's a mitzvah to bring Shamei Chagiga. If you didn't bring it, the whole of Shmini Atzeres, the whole sukkahs, you can bring it on Shmini Atzeres. That's the top line. Including Shmini Atzeres. So therefore, since Shmini Atzeres is the replacement of the whole sukkahs, so it's tougher, it's secondary to sukkahs, and therefore if somebody would say to you, why can't the Torah when it says separate for 7 days, maybe it's referring to Shmini Atzeres, what would you say to him? Why not?
7 and 1.
It is 7 for 1. So why can't you separate? Maybe when the Torah says Kasher Tzivo is referring to Shmini Atzeres, it's secondary to Sukkot. And for Sukkot, you're not separating, and that doesn't make sense. In what ways is secondary to Sukkot? Tashlumin for the Shamei Chagiga. Fading more Atzeres. Let's say we're talking about Shavuos now. The Prisha Shiur, it's 7 for 1. So therefore, maybe when the Torah says Kasher Tzivo Las is the Chape Aleichem, it's referring to just like he did the Shminas Minami, we should do for Shavuos. The fact is, we compare Shivas Me'amilum, where it was 1 cow, 1 ram, to Yom Kippur, which is 1 cow, 1 ram, to exclude Shavuos, which is 2 rams. Therefore, you don't separate 7 days for Shavuos because it's not the same as Shivas Me'amilum. Here we've got Machrikas, which comes up again and again. The main sugi is on Daf Ayin, so we're going to have a long time together. in Daf Yomi, it's not so long, it's only 2 months, but I said still, today since the Rambam, I was very impressed one year. I was so in Kippur night, I couldn't sleep. So I picked up an art scroll on Machzor in Kippur, the middle between Mav and Shachris, got long arichas by the Korbanos, very beautifully written. And there it sets about very clearly this fundamental question which we're going to tackle now, which comes up a lot. And the question is like this. The Torah tells us which Korbanos we should bring on Yom Kippur in which parsha. Which parsha does the Torah tell you what Korbanos you should bring on Yom Kippur? Which parsha in the Torah, if you want to look it up? Which parsha would you look up? What's the answer? The answer is that the Torah actually tells it us in 2 places. One in Achremos and one in Pinchas. And the question is, what's going on? This is a machlokas tanoim, how to settle this question. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem. The Torah says we're listed in one place, and they're listed in another place. And now the question is, wait a second, what's going on? So one man dharma, which is the way the Rambam paskins, is it's 2 completely different lists, and you have to bring both lists. Both are true. This is just Rabbi that holds that some of the Kabbalahs are repeated, and you don't have to bring both lists. It says 80% of one, 80% of the other, and the 20% overlap. So according to Rabbi, according to one man dharma, on Yom Kippur, how many rams do you bring 2? If you bring 2 rams, so the question is like this: they said you have to separate 7 for 1. What did we say is Yom Kippur? So maybe it's Shavuos. Says, well, no, Shavuos you bring 2 rams. But according to one man dharma, on Yom Kippur you also bring 2 rams. And if on Yom Kippur you bring 2 rams, and you say that you separated 7 for 1 for Yom Kippur, in what way is it different Yom Kippur to Shavuos? And maybe we should separate only for Shavuos. It's one ram. Who can? The same ram which is mentioned in here in Achveimus is the one which is mentioned in the Chumash HaPekodim, which is Bamitzvah, which means Pinchas. It's separate ones. As well, if you do bring 2 rams in Yom Kippur, one of them is brought for the Musaf and one is brought special for the Kapora. Mashake in Shavuos, it's both brought for the special Chivas Hayom. And Shmiras Miluim, you only bought 1. So therefore, the Gemara says you're back to the original statement, which is what? What's the original statement? That the Torah says that you should separate yourself for 7 days for Shmini Atzeres. So too, you should do Lasis Lechape. Lasis Lechape is Yom Kippur and Poa Aduma, to exclude the others, because the others are not the same, and therefore you can't compare. Each one is different. Shavuos is different, it's 2 rams. Maybe Rosh Hashanah. Maybe you're going to Rosh Hashanah, separate 7 days to 1. Diffusa Shivalim Echadu. Omar Bavon. Donon Par Va'al Shaloi, Mi Par Va'al Shaloi. La Fuke Atzeres Rosh Hashanah de Tzibuninu. The common denominator on Yom Kippur and on Shmiras Miluim is that Aaron HaKohen had to pay for the cow and the ram himself. On Rosh Hashanah, Klal Yisrael had to pay for it. That means the avodah on Yom Kippur is done by the Kohen Gadol, and we're going to see that he had to pay for the korbanos. So therefore, Rosh Hashanah, the tzibur paid for the korbanos. So we are trying to say, when the Torah says, just like you did the Shmiras Miluim, so too you shall do another 2 times, La'asos Lechape. And we want to suggest that maybe it's not Yom Kippur, maybe it's Rosh Hashanah. Says the Gemara, no, it's not likely to be Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is not similar to Shmiras Miluim, because Rosh Hashanah, the korban is brought by the tzibur, Mashkin Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol pays for it. Top of Gemara, please. The Torah says a few times, kach lecha, take for yourself. Asay lecha, make for yourself. And I'm going to have a machlokas. What does that pasuk mean? Does it mean kach lecha literally? Take for yourself, meaning you provide it, you pay for it, you make it from your own, or not? Maybe the Torah means kach lecha, you should be the one who's achroy for it. And we'll get another explanation soon. Now, it's like this. We're having a machlokas now. Was the avodah on Yom Kippur, did the Kohen Gadol have to pay for the korbanos? The nafkamina is, because we said that where we did the Shmiras Miluim, you should do the rest of you should do other times, which is what is Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur and Poa Aduma. So we said, why not Rosh Hashanah? We said Rosh Hashanah because the Kohen Gadol doesn't pay for it, Yom Kippur does. Now, how do you know Yom Kippur pays for it? From the fact that it says, Akach Lecho. But who says you take it for yourself? Well, says, any man should simply make the mima. The Tanya, kach lecho mishalcho. V'asi lecho mishalcho. V'yikchu elecho. They shall take for you mishal tzibur divrei Rav Yoshi. Rav Yonis and Yoma, no. Bein kach lecho, bein v'yikchu lecho mishal tzibur. It's always from the tzibur. Amar Talmudim kach lecho. Ki b'yochel mishalcho ani voitze yes mishalahem. Really, whenever it says kach lecho, it means that Klal Yisrael have to pay for it. Klal Yisrael pay for it. Or it says take for yourself. So it is kach lecho. Hashem says to Aaron, really, I would prefer it from you, not from Klal Yisrael. But the fact is, since I love the whole of Klal Yisrael, I'll take from the whole of Klal Yisrael. Rashi has two explanations. Why is it kibiyochel? So Rashi says, let's see the top of Rashi is the top line kibiyochel. It would be theoretically possible that Klal Yisrael could get a kapor with the code of an individual. I'd prefer yours, but the fact is Klal Yisrael can't. So therefore, I'll take from Klal Yisrael. But if you should double kosher, Lima Shaktrochu Kotz be Yisrael, Hashem is second by Klal Yisrael. Oime kibiyochel. Kulima kolchenu Yoma king. Ki'ilu ef shalema king. Chel kibiyochel shubetavut. Of course, Hashem doesn't want to really reject Klal Yisrael. It says if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is rejecting Klal Yisrael. So Lemaisa says the Gemara. Mishalchani v'yitzeis mishalem. Again, we've got machlokes when the Torah says kach lecho. Does the Torah mean that Aaron has to provide it or Klal Yisrael provide it? If we say that Aaron provides it, so it's very good. Yom Kippur, Aaron provided. Shivas Me'amilim, Aaron provided. Rosh Hashanah, Klal Yisrael provided. And that's why we don't see the separation of 7 days as for Rosh Hashanah. But if we say that Kach Lecha means Klal Yisrael provided, so Yom Kippur is provided by Klal Yisrael, Rosh Hashanah is provided by Klal Yisrael, so who told you the separation of 7 days is referring to Yom Kippur? Maybe it's referring to Rosh Hashanah. You can't say there's a difference. Now the Gemara goes off a bit of a tangent. What's Pshat and Kach Lecha? Like the word dashes with in the singular avoid eight. In the singular, you Moshe make for yourself on it. I will not say shittim. Is it an individual request of Moshe Rabbeinu, or is it a public request for the whole of Kaisel? Okay, so when Kaisel do Hashem wants it for the whole of Kaisel. When they do it, it's from the individual. I explain it more outside and then explain it inside. Again, I want to get the kasha very clear. The Torah says by Shivas Mi'amiluim that you have to separate for 7 days. The Torah says just like separate Shivas Mi'amiluim, you have to separate also for other 2 times you Kippur and for Aduma. It says, well, maybe it means Rosh Hashanah. It says, well, no, because Rosh Hashanah, Klal Yisrael provide the Kabbonas, while Shivas Mi'amiluim and Yom Kippur, Aaron provide the Kabbonas. It says, well, that's not true. That Aaron provided the Kabbonas is you're basing it on the logic because it says Kach Lecho. But that word's Kach Lecho is open to interpretation by 2 different shittas. One man holds it is indeed that you pay for it, but one man holds that everybody has to pay for it. And Kach Lecho just means I prefer it from you. What the Gemara answers is regarding Shivas Mi'amiluim and Yom Kippur, it doesn't just use the words Kach Lecho. The Torah emphasizes very, very clearly that Aaron had to pay for it. And therefore, it's not based on the fact that the Torah says Kach Lecho. It's based on the fact that the Torah itself clearly defines that Aaron is the one that has to pay for the Kabbonas, both the Shivas Mi'amiluim and on Yom Kippur. And therefore, nobody argues. The argument we should have used in the Yoshia regarding this Kach Lecho meaning from yourself and from others is in other places. It's in other Kabbonas. But when it comes to Yom Kippur and the Shivas Mi'amiluim, then nobody argues. Why does nobody argue? Because there the Torah clearly says that Aaron was one who had to provide the Kabbonas, not Klal Yisrael. So therefore, since there it's very clear, we're back to this original statement that we have to compare Yom Kippur to Shivas Mi'amiluim, not Rosh Hashanah. Because why is Rosh Hashanah different? Because Klal Yisrael provided. Klal Yisrael provided. But Yom Kippur, Aaron provided. Oh, we said Kach Lecho is a machlokes. Not by Yom Kippur, not Shivas Mi'amiluim. Why not by Yom Kippur and Shivas Mi'amiluim? Because there it says it much more clearly. That's the more says like this. Ad can they only argue with Kichos D'Alma, generally Kichos V'Asiyos D'Alma. Kichos D'Alma Kach Lecho Samin, that's by this Ketuvos. Asiyos D'Alma, Asiyos Shtechatzis Kesef. Aval Hanoch, by Yom Kippur, Shivas Mi'amiluim, Perushik Mefarish Mishulchahu. Femiluim, by the Miluim Mechtik Siva B'Leisol Dabelei Moy. It says clearly, speak to Klal Yisrael, Kchu, they shall take Siyos V'Lechatos. And he says to Aaron by himself, you take for yourself Egel B'Bokal Lechatos. Lomani, Why does it change from the plural to the singular from one pasuk to the next? The answer is Shvam Lokach Lecha Mishulcho. B'Yom Kippur, Mechtik Siv Zayis Avad HaKodesh V'Pam Mekach Lechatos V'Goyma. You should bring a cow, etc. And then the pasuk says Ume'eis Adas B'nei Yisrael, and from Klal Yisrael Ikach Shtei Seres U'Lechatos. V'Ikev Espa Lechatos Asher Loi Lomoni. Shvam No Loi Misheloihu. It's from his. Okay. That means like this. Let's summarize what we've been doing for about a daf and a half. We're going to go on with this. The Torah says we know the halacha that on Yom Kippur you separate 7 days, and Paradum you separate 7 days. We know that Shiur Seminurim is separated for 7 days. We know the Torah says Lasis Lechaper. So we doubt that Lasis Lechaper is referring to Avodah of Yom Kippur and Avodah of Paradum. The Gemara asks the kasha, maybe it's referring to other Avodas. So the Gemara says no, you've got Shabbat Tzivot Tzivot. Furthermore, maybe Tzivot is referring to Savoiso, to other Kabbalah. The Gemara says no, we always go to the closest Gzeil Shabbat. So then the Gemara asks, okay, let's see if we can do it outside. Why not korbanos? Does anybody know why can't the lechape mean any korban at all? Maybe if every korban should separate for 7 days.
Because every korban you mechaper.
Because most korbanos are mechaper. Why ask them most korbanos are mechaper?
That one we said that.
What's the word saying? You have to stretch your memory back to yesterday. So every kohen, fading more or less, at least do the mishmer space av. Answers more, it's not a fixed time. Fading more, what about Pesach and Sukkot?
7 days.
7. Fading more, what about Shmini Atzeres? What about Shavuos? The Maskona?
2 rounds.
Shavuos is 2 rams. Shavuos is 1 ram. What about Rosh Hashanah? Look, Rosh Hashanah is Chivas at Tzibur. The Tzibur provided, Yom Kippur is provided by the individual. Says the Gemara, Rashi Yoma. Rashi gives another reason. Don't impale chatas v'ayla oilam, impale chatas v'ayla oilam. La'afuki Rosh Hashanah v'atzeres the shavai oilis ninu. It's more likely when the Torah says you should separate for 7 days that we should do something similar. On Yom Kippur and on Shivas Miluim, we had 1 calf for a chatas and a ram for an oilam. On Rosh Hashanah, everything is an oilam. So therefore, it's more likely that we're referring to Yom Kippur and not to Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is all oilos, by Yom Kippur is half chatos and half oilam. Rabbi Nama, don't avoid the Kohen Gadol. Avoid the Kohen Gadol. I forget kuli kushais until avoid the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi's got one simple answer that answers all the questions. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Rosh Hashanah. What's his answer? Is that Shivas Mea Miluim and Poa Aduma and Yom Kippur are unique, that you need a special Kohen to do it, the Kohen Gadol. Ma'ashe'en kein Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Rosh Hashanah. Anybody can do it. Since anybody can do it, so therefore it's not likely that the Torah is telling you to separate for 7 days. It's talking about any Kohen. So I think it's got a completely different answer. Special Kohen. It's the scan Kohen. Okay. Says the Gemara, a slightly different version in Ravina, which we're going to examine. The first avodah to the first avodah. Okay, how do you have tchila not the first? First meaning the supreme avodah. My tchila, what's mean that the supreme, the first avodah? But these avodas require Kohen Gadol. That's exactly the same as the first answer. If you say we're comparing similar avodas in that the fact is that they're the first or the supreme, so that's the same as what we just answered. The Shivas Mea Miluim, what was special about it? It was the first time that Aaron went into the base of Mishkan to do avodah. So he never did avodah. On Yom Kippur, it's the only time the Kohen Gadol goes to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Actually, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot doesn't answer part. Don't only answers that. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, and all the rest. The Shmini Atzeres. It's every time he goes to avodah. It's not unique that they go to Kodesh HaKadoshim. So we've actually got 4 answers how we know that it's not referring to Rosh Hashanah. What are the 4 answers that when the Torah says Lasis Lechape, it's not referring to Rosh Hashanah? Right, one is the Korans come from the Tzibur, Mashenkin, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur comes from the Kohen Gadol. Ravashi, that on Rosh Hashanah it's all oilos. Yom Kippur and Shmini Atzeres is half. The Ravina is Kohen Gadol, Mashenkin, Rosh Hashanah is not Kohen Gadol. Or that Yom Kippur you're going to be some Kodesh Kedoshim, like the Mishkan, which you're going to the Mishkan. Mashenkin by Rosh Hashanah, you're not going to Kodesh Kedoshim. What you're doing is a standard avodah. Okay. Kiyosef Avdimi, Omar. Avdimi came from Edsol, so that's fine. That means, even though until now we've taken it on as a simple statement, that this halacha that you have to separate for 7 days is true in Yom Kippur and Por Aduma. In fact, it's a machlekas. Rabbi Yochanan only held this by one case. Only one of those two you have to separate for 7 days. But Rabbi Shua ben Levi held it in 2 of these cases. That means Rabbi Yochanan actually disagrees with one of these cases, and he holds you don't need to separate for 7 days. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan masni chada. Lasis lechape elu ma'asim ha'kippurim. You have to separate from Yom Kippur. According to Rabbi Yochanan, does the Kohen have to separate before the Shiur for the Por Aduma? No, don't have to. Let's see what Rabbi Yochanan again. Rabbi Yochanan masni chada. Lasis lechape elu ma'asim ha'kippurim. Only Yom Kippur. Por Aduma Moshe. For Por Aduma, do you have to separate for 7 days? No, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't have to. You don't have to. It's only for Yom Kippur. So we've got machlekas Rabbi Yochanan and Shua ben Levi. Does a Kohen have to separate for Por Aduma for 7 days? Very the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan masni chada. He says there's only one. Well, non tanan. We've learned 2 mishnayos. What's the 2 mishnayos? Shiva samim kedim v'kipurim. Shiva samim kedim sefer saporo. We've got 2 mishnayos. And one Mishnah says Yom Kippur, one Mishnah says Por Aduma. How can Rabbi Yochanan say only one? There's a Mishnah against Rabbi Yochanan. Answers if more Mala Ba'alma was just a chum. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't need to. If you want to, you can. It's a chum. It's a chum. It's a chum. Oh. Rashi asks a very, very interesting question. Rashi asks, I like his style. It's very, if you wanted to, it goes very short ways. If you wanted to challenge Rabbi Yochanan, how would you challenge Rabbi Yochanan? Think about it for a second. How would you challenge Rabbi Yochanan? You don't need to be our Mishnah, because Rabbi Yochanan agrees with our Mishnah. Which Mishnah is the real one to challenge Rabbi Yochanan from? For Por Aduma. Why does one need to say? Rabbi Yochanan says, one, I'll bring you 2 Mishnahs. Rabbi Yochanan holds Por Aduma doesn't need it. Just bring the Mishnah of Por Aduma and that's it. He brings from the Gemara Savi a beautiful sefer from Shagas Arya on Yoma. I need to get it, I haven't got it yet. The Gemara Savi, he wrote on certain Masechtas, only a few Masechtas, right? He only wrote on Yoma, Sukkah, and Moshana, I think that's it. It's a beautiful svar. So he says an interesting svar like this: that the Gemara wanted to cut Rabbi Yochanan's answer from the source. What's Rabbi Yochanan's answer? It's a chumrah. It says Gemara it's not likely to be a chumrah. Why? Because we've got 2 mishnayos with a similar style, and they both say that the Kohen Gadol has to separate 7 days. And just like by one you hold that's me'ikei adin, so it's mistaber that the second one is also me'ikei adin, and that's what Gemara brought both mishnayos. It's a shtickle chap. That you think the Gemara knew that Vichel might answer it's a chumrah. So what the Gemara said is, don't tell me it's going to be a chumrah, because I'm going to bring 2 mishnayos. They both say the same thing, and according to you, only one is true. And if it's true, one's chumrah. The Vichel disregards it. He says, no. Nevertheless, it's only a chumrah, meaning I don't care that the Mishnah uses the same language both times. I hold that it's a chumrah. You have?
It hasn't answered the question. Like the chap.
It has. The Gemara wanted to challenge Vichel in a stronger way.
That way, you can't answer that.
No,
you did answer that.
but so what? But you've asked the question better. The question is, why do you need to bring both mishnayos?
The answer's not as good.
That's right, to weaken the answer. Okay. Very the Gemara. Is it true that Vichel holds only one? How can you say such things? Rabbi Yochanan himself speaks, and he himself says, "Lasos is Por Aduma, and Chapa is Yom Kippur." So how can you say that Rabbi Yochanan holds it's not necessary? Answers Gemara, "Hu the Rabbi." That's his quoting his Rebbe, but not himself. So if you'd ask Rabbi Yochanan himself, he held what? That you don't need to. You don't need to. Only one. You do not need to separate for 7 days for Por. And in fact, the Rambam Paschals like Rabbi Yochanan, you don't need to. It's only a chumrah ba'alma. But Rabbi Yochanan's Rebbe, Lemaisa, which was Rabbi Shmuel, what does Rabbi Yochanan's Rebbe hold? 2. Last is lechapa. You have to separate for both. So this is very disturbed. That why would Rabbi Yochanan argue with his Rebbe? You don't argue with the Rebbe so quickly, especially since Rabbi Shmuel lived much, much earlier than him. Rabbi Shmuel was a Tan of Yochanan's Namoyah. So this answer is, we will see later, it's actually Machlokes Tanoim. When it's another Machlokes Tanoim, then you can argue with another time. Okay. So if somebody says he wants Rabbi Yochanan holds, it's a bit tricky. Because Rabbi Yochanan himself holds only one. Rabbi Yochanan's from his Rebbe held 2. Okay. Where did you learn it from? Where did you learn the concept of separate for 7 days? Don't look inside. Where did Rabbi Yochanan learn you have to separate for 7 days from? Where did you learn? From Miluim. Very good. Bimiluim. From Miluim. Very good. Ima Miluim klakos ben makiben. Afachanam klakos ben makiben. The halacha we will learn later, the whole sugya, that everything that happened to us Miluim was makib. If Aaron could would have done one small mistake, a minor mistake, which in normal circumstances will not disturb us, right? We've had many times, if you do Ezra Mekreman, if you don't put it, doesn't matter. Many Kabbalah stuff, he's supposed to do, what's the word for it? Shlomim twice. Let's say he did it only once. If you're supposed to sprinkle the blood twice, let's say you sprinkle the Shlomim only once. What's the din? It's not Makam. It's not Makam. But that Shivas Me'amilim was a unique thing. Mashallah Torah tells us that Anna couldn't done one step wrong in those 7 days, the whole thing would have been a disaster. Wouldn't have worked. Said okay, according to you, where did you learn the idea of separating 7 days from where? The Shivas Me'amilim. So let's learn it properly. In Shivas Me'amilim, was it Ma'akav? Yes. So here it should also be Ma'akav. Is it Ma'akav in our Mishnah? Is it Ma'akav in our Mishnah that couldn't have separated 7 days? Rishlokish proves from our Mishnah that it's not Ma'akav. He proves it from the slight change in expression in the Mishnah. Mishnah says like this: Shiva Kedem Mafrishin, we separate. Separate means to move them out. And in Umaskinin Loikö Nacher, we Maskinin. What's good word for maskin in English? Prepare. Prepare. Okay, what did you say? Point. I think prepare is better. Maskin is to prepare. Now, why did the Mishnah use a separate losh? Why not just say Mafrishin Kö Nacher? The answer is the second Kön, as we mentioned, we didn't separate it. All we actually did was set Mersha's clothes in case other Kohen God would die or something go wrong, and therefore we should have something to wear because it has to be the right size. But it doesn't say Mafrishin. So if Chasham, the first Kohen Takel come Tomei, the second Kohen will take over without being separated for 7 days. So it's a raya from our Mishnah that is an Akav or not Ma'akav? No. Not. Now you have Yechanan, a logical says V'shlokish Tav Yechanan. What do you say? That we learned from Shivas Me'amiluim. Shivas Me'amiluim was everything Ma'akav. What's that? We never got good translation of Ma'akav Mishnah. Ma'akav is, I said it said obligatory, but it's not right. Ma'akav is more than obligatory. Ma'akav is it is
essential.
Essential. What?
Fixed.
More than the fixed. It's essential. It would disqualify without it being done that way. So Shivas Me'amiluim, everything would disqualify, and yet in our Mishnah it's not disqualifies. So there it's not essential. So therefore, you yourself are no good. You're learning it from Shivas Me'amiluim, but you're not learning from Shivas Me'amiluim. It's essential. Here it's not. Let's see the more inside. And everything's ma'akiv, and everything's ma'akiv. And if you say, okay, everything's ma'akiv. But it's not masculine but look at the mafrishin. It doesn't say mafrishin. If you say it means the same thing, listen, or individual masculine, or individual mafrishin. So Rabbi Shvichnon is upset indeed. He doesn't know how you can do it. And it's very interesting. Rabbi Shvichnon does not answer this question. He doesn't answer the question. He never answers this question. The more much later comes back to this. Rabbi Shvichnon never answers the question. The Gvor Shagas Arya. You know, the Shagas Arya was being nifted. So I had the Gemara say a short story. What happened was that the Chevra Kadisha came into him and they said to him, you should say Vidui. So he said to him, I can't say video, I never did any Averos. So what do you mean you never said Averos? I was always too busy learning. And what happened was, these stories, Shagasai was somebody that we can't possibly imagine as being in learning. And one time he became a Rav in his old age. And this kid didn't really want it. They said, you're going to die soon. He said, no, I'll give you 20 years. Like he died 20 years later. But when he became Rav, he established Vanessa very, very quickly. And the people in Kehillah didn't like it. They said that it's not respectable. Maybe the English Vanessa, you should go through 2 daf in your mind. And then afterwards do a shalom. That way, it looks nicer. He said, what do you think I'm doing? I did 2 daf. And I still managed to finish. That's what it says, the Shagasai. It's unbelievable. It's goodness of Shagasai. You should know that some people are makpid that for every mitzvah to quote the Shagas Arya. The reason is because he was so devoted to Torah, he had a certain level of kedusha which we want to imbibe into the mitzvah bracha, imbue, if that's the right word. But anyway, so Shagas Arya answers what?
In green.
In green. So the vice the Shagas Arya answers, and the reason why the Gemara didn't answer it because he felt that the question wasn't a good one. Because he felt that just because you learn one from the other doesn't mean that you have to learn everything from the other. We learn the idea of separation 7 days, but it doesn't mean that we have to learn that it's ma'akav. That's what he says.
Maybe it's 1 day. Well, what do you learn?
Okay, I hear. Okay, I hear. You should write it to your sheikh. Take a Shagas and write it. So Abir said to Vishlokish, I agree with you. I was also disturbed by it. I was disturbed by it. I don't know more than that. But you, sir, where did you learn it from? I find it very interesting. If you look at Mekivega, given a shas, he always writes very, very cryptically, extremely cryptically. He says, that text says that you never say ma to a Talmud. You never say ma, sir, to a Talmud. You don't say that. So he's asking a kasha, leaves it to Shver. Why did Rabbi Yochanan regard the Shlokish as ma? How can you say ma? How do you answer the question? I do. So Rashi talks about that. He says even Talmud Chava, it's more on the person that we don't say ma to. See, Rashi answers that he was so impressed with the question, so he called him ma as respectful. Okay, El ma meichi alifah. So okay, very good. You don't like me. We don't like learning Shivas Miami Noim. So where do you learn it from? Oh, my name is Sinai Dichsif. By Yisroel Pedashol Sinai v'chasei onon sheishes Yomi. What happened was the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days. Why called Moshe b'mashvi? Hashem called Moshe the 7th day. Mechtik sivei called Moshe b'mashvi sheishes Yomim. Why does it need to say that the cloud covered for 6 days? Just say called Moshe the 7th day. So Bono this teaches us. Binyan Av works like this: that if I see a concept in one place, Binyan Av says I can say that mistama it is true in other cases. It's not Hekesh, it's not Gzir Shava, it's a Binyan Av. Hekesh is when the Torah mentions two separate topics next to each other. The Torah mentions Bikurim and Basa B'Cholov together. We learn the certain connections. Gzir Shava is when we have two words in two different places which are similar. So Hekesh has two topics next to each other. So the Shava is two words in two separate places which are similar. Binyan Av is the Torah tells us something, which is that means we see. If I say that after our Shiur, a person should be very happy with themselves to know they learn tens of thousands of words, you can say the same thing by another place. Is that Binyan Av is just a similar idea. So since the Torah says that the clouds covered the mountain for 6 days and then Moshe went in, you have to be away for 6 days. For 6 days before you go to Machne Shechina, So that's where Shlokish learns it from. Not from Lasses Nechapim, which we've been doing for the past 2 days, but from a different place. Now we learned 7. As is Mama, the Chayish, the Tumas Beis, top of Dalad Damdalef. It's a possible this week's parsha. Whenever we have possible this week's parsha, I will say this week's parsha, right at the end of Mitzvah, it says like this: somebody who has relations with a niddah, the T to Mosa Olaf. He gets her tumah, and he'll be tummy for 7 days. Rashi asks, what's the two things? Rashi explains like this: that a person has relations with a niddah. So let's say she's up to the 5th day, and she's going to go to mikveh in 3 days' time. When does he go to mikveh? 7 days later. Says Rashi, if that's the case, why 17 nidos olav that he gets her tumah? So Rashi says not only he has the tumah of 7 days, but he gets all the chumas of tumah's niddah of other chumas. So the Maisa, there is such a thing that a person can become tummy for 7 days. No, it's din tumah. It's not a punishment. He gets kos besides. If he did it amazing, if he did it with shoygig, he has to bring a chatos. If he did it in the oinus, doesn't need to bring anything at all. That's a big shal in Yehuda. If a person has normal relations with his wife and she becomes a niddah, he doesn't need to bring a chatos. Why does he need to bring a chatos? It's not a shoygig. A shoygig is only when there was a reason to suspect. Oh, that is a very big topic. We'll leave that. But he doesn't get kos unless it's amazing gets kos. Now here we're talking about Kohen Gadol. He leaves his family 7 days before. If you only have 6 days before, it is possible to have relations. And by mistake, she'll suddenly find out in the middle that she's a niddah. And then what will happen is he'll be tummy for 7 days, and then for 6 days won't be good enough. So if you ask me, Shlokish, how do you have to say for 7 days? I'll say, 6 days I know from Matan Torah. The 7th from Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. I'm going to do a tiny bit more. Omalei Yehuda ben Shlokish. Bishlim le'titidaf miluim, learn from miluim.
6 days from
Because it says they chasei on sheishes something. 6 days the covered card when there was Binyan Av.
But it didn't say that they have to separate from the wife 6 days. It says,
Oh, but it says that if you go to Machne Shechina, you have to be for 6 days covered away from Hashem. So we'll discuss later what Shlokish means later. That's during those 7 days that the Kohen Gadol was separated in the Lishkas Parhedron, and the Kohen of the Paraduma was in which Lishka, Moshe? Which chamber was he in? What was it called? The Lishkas what? What was it called? The chamber that the Kohen of the Paraduma. What was it called? Lishkas Ha'evan, the stone chamber. Remember, Lishkas Parhedron. What? Lishkas Parhedron and Lishkas Ha'evan. Oh, because everything was stone, because we don't want anything to come tummy. The Beis was in the room where everything was not tummy. So during those 7 days, they used to sprinkle on both Kohanim Gedolim every single day from every single Paraduma that ever existed. Because every time they did the Paraduma, they would always split it into 3 parts. One main part for Klal Yisrael, one part for Geniza to be last forever, and one part to be used for all Kohanim Gedolim for the future. So what happened was, let's say, for example, in the middle of the second Beis Hamikdash, how many parts of Thomas have been in history? Does anybody know? 9. Very good. There's been only 9 which have to make the 10th. So let's say you're middle by Sheni, there's already been 7 done already, right? Shimon did 2, Shimon HaKohen did 2, Shimon Tzaddik did 2. Right, okay, but what was, one of Moshe Rabbeinu lasted about 400-500 years, and afterwards it went quicker because the more people, more Tomei, etc. What was like this? The every Kohen that was waiting during the 7 days would get sprinkled from every single Parah Adumah, every single day, in order to make sure that we're definitely told in case one of the Parah Adumas didn't work, whatever it may be. Every single day will get sprinkled on. So that makes sense. Why? Because during the Shiva Simei Miluim, Aaron and his sons got sprinkled on. But according to you, that you're learning it from Matan Torah, from the 6 days in the cloud, Moshe Rabbeinu never got any sprinkling there. Says the Gemara, Hani the Tani says a matter of course, Shimon Kol Chatzor Shosham Davin Amiazov Miluim. Ele the Doch Diafes Sinai. If you're learning from Har Sinai, Hazov Sinai Miavoy. Was there any sprinkling on Har Sinai? Omalei Sishlokish Paiso Birichvam Letamich. According to you, Mi Nicha. Is any better according to you? The Miluim Dam. When Moshe Rabbeinu sprinkled Aaron during the Shiva Simei Miluim, what did he sprinkle on him? Blood from the Kabbalas. Hachamaim. Here, what is being sprinkled on? Waters from the Parah Adumah. How can you say that? For me, it's okay. Richard says to Shlokish, according to me, it's wonderful. Just like Shiva Simei Miluim is sprinkled, so too this kind of gets sprinkled. Says Shlokish, according to you, it's not much better. Because according to you, why is he sprinkling in water? He's sprinkling blood. Answers the Gemara. Holy kasha, that's not shver. Why? That later, after the Beis Mikdash was built, water was instead of blood. I'll explain it in 1 minute. And I'll see that there was no azor. It was just a maila. The reason, according to Shlokish, that the sprinkle was a maila. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when did we say maila ba'alma? Does anybody remember? When according to Rabbi Yehuda, we say maila ba'alma? By Parah Adumah being separated for 7 days because he doesn't hold being separated. According to Shlokish, it is, we learn it from the Ma'ale Ba'alma was the sprinkling. I just want to say, we're going to stop over here. We'll show tomorrow. It's a quite long daf, but it's an easier daf, which will be okay. I want to say one thing about Nichnas Umayim Tachas Dam. It's a very interesting thing. When does anybody know when they burnt the very first Parah Adumah? This is the first time I heard this. It was very chish. When did they burn the first Parah Adumah? Which when they did it, but which day of the year was it? It was the second day of Nisan. Now, how long does it take to become Torah from Parah Adumah? 7 days. Anakim, when did he start the Avodah? First day of Nisan. So Anakim was actually at Tzmei Meis when he started serving the Avodah in the Beis Mikdash, in the Mishkan. Can you imagine such a thing?
There wasn't any food for Har Sinai.
It was after Har Sinai.
Yeah, but who said he touched it?
Well, his whole life he was careful never to be Beis. Everybody's Beis. Lakom Pesach, not all Avodas. Tosa asked Kasha later. Actually, Tosa says what you're saying, Yehuda. Very good. But okay, he suggested. I just said one thing. So the Gemara says that what Moshe Rabbeinu did with the blood during the 7 days, that was replaced with water of the ashes of Parah Adumah. So water became the substitute for blood. Am I clear? So therefore, the Parah Adumah water is a substitute for blood. Says Rabbi Yehuda, according to me, that they sprinkled all the Shiva Simei Miluim in blood. So that's why it makes sense that on the Kanim Gedolim would get sprinkled 7 days worth of water of the ashes of the Parah Adumah. According to you, with Shlokish, they never did any sprinkling because we're learning from Har Sinai. Why would you sprinkle? Shlokish answers, Ma'ale Ba'alma was a special chumrah that they did. Very good. Okay, shkoyach everybody. We're mamish into learning the halachas of the separating for 7 days. Tzloch with everything. Actually, I mean,